Welcome to Session 11. Session 11 deals with the administration of application software. It's the second in a series of 3 application software presentations. And today we're going to be talking about the whole issue of software that really improves and helps management. In today's session, we're going to talk about a number of issues that relate to the management of offices and operations and installations from a viewpoint of some very innovative and creative software application packages. Before we do that, there are really a number of important issues that have emerged out of this whole area, Barry. And one of the issues is information access, which has really been important. And we're going to there look at the issues that relate to what's up to date in terms of technical information. And there we're going to look at a CD-ROM disk. And I know you've had a lot of experience in that area. We're going to be looking at the issue of scanning, what's really happened in scanning, and how it will really make a big difference to what office managers can do in order to really handle information that's not in the information superhighway and it's not readily available. We're going to be looking at how one improves communications both externally and internally from some very, very innovative practices in which Lotus Notes are being used. And we're going to look at the issue of employee selection and placement and how a software application package will really let the skills and competencies that are really essential to carry out a very important function within a large organization can really make a big difference in getting the right people. And finally, we're going to look at the whole issue of automated training, which is only now really becoming a very, very important issue because training is so expensive. As we look at these things, Barry, what sense do you have as to what kinds of issues that we need to tell the audience about that would really make a difference to them as they began to look at their own office practices?
I think we've mentioned this a couple of times, and probably the key point that I think we want to make here today is that, yes, we need to look at these different types of software, but more importantly, you need to look at the needs of your office. And I think we keep coming back and back and back to that, but I don't want to de-emphasize it. I want to say it one more time because it is just so critical. It is not the software application itself that is going to solve your problem. It is the combination of a lot of activities. But first, you have to be able to identify the requirement or the need in your office and then look at all the different alternatives to meet that need. And it could be management, it could be technology-based, or it could just be the introduction of more training in the office. But all of these items have to be taken into account when you go ahead and start on trying to satisfy a need.
Well, one of the things about needs in offices is that they're constantly changing. And the application software at the same time is constantly changing. How can we get a really acceptable melt between those two factors?
Well, one thing I think you need to look at is obviously, once you've defined your needs, look at the available software products that are out there. And I believe you said once before that don't just look at your current needs, but also try and project your needs in the out years and try and get a software or technology product in-house that will match that technology needs and maybe even be able to match those needs into the future. So don't just try and pick a software product that is going to meet your needs just for today, but look at that company in a number of different ways, not just the software capabilities, but also their management strategy and their vision of the future, and make sure that you are both walking down the same road when you try and solve a problem.
And one of the first parts of that is to actually be able to access information that lets you improve your management decisions.
Exactly.
And so in the first thing that we're going to look at today is the issue of the kinds of information that almost anybody can have in their office.
Well, and information you really need to access in order to help you make a better decision on selecting the kind of technology you need.
Well, okay, then let's just take a look at one company that does this, which is Computer Select. And let's see the kinds of information that they have.
Okay.
Okay, and that's important because the CD-ROM technology, which is, I understand, what Computer Select provides, is something that just about every office can have.
It's affordable. And you're charged a one-time fee. You get monthly updates on the CD-ROM. It's not like an online service where you get charged per use. You could use this type of technology over and over again.
Okay, let's just take a look at this technology and see what it can do for the typical office. CD-ROM technology has really taken off in the last couple of years. We've gone from where we were to an increase of double the speed. The storage has dramatically increased, and it's not unusual now to get 640 million characters of storage on a single CD-ROM disk. This kind of storage has a lot of potential for administration. Barry, what are the kinds of things that you've been able to look at in CD-ROM technology that will make a difference to our viewing audience?
Well, the students have to realize that the CD-ROM technology has really grown over the last couple of years. We've gone, like you said, from single speed to double speed, but now we're even up to triple speed. And one of the things, especially in a multimedia environment, that they have to look for is the sustained transfer rate, which is basically the flow of information from the CD-ROM into your computer. And before, in most of the other multimedia applications, it had to be at 150 kilobits per second, and that's pretty much still true. But the access to information has really been a lot easier and a lot quicker than it has been in recent years. And also the number of publications out there has really dramatically increased. So almost anything that you want is on CD-ROM technology now.
These kinds of things are pretty important for managers who are trying to make decisions, and they want to have an active source that they can really afford.
Yeah, one of the things that we've heard from students is that getting on online services can be quite expensive if you really are unsure of what you're looking for, if you want to look for a lot of different technologies or ideas or problems that you're trying to solve. And CD-ROM technology is a fixed cost. You just have to buy the CD-ROM, which is a one-time cost, and then the CD-ROMs. And it's really, I think, a very economical way to go in there and just run up any number of searches to try and find the information you're looking for.
We talk about how much storage is on there. Also, you can update these CD-ROM rather inexpensively if you're a manufacturer, can't you?
Exactly. A lot of the CD-ROM manufacturers out there now provide you a one-time subscription charge, and then they provide you monthly updates on CD-ROM, which is really nice because you get the most recent information. The one that we're going to be looking at right now is called Computer Select from Ziff Publications. And they provide a monthly CD-ROM that has the most current information about computer or technology in the industry. Do you want to go ahead and take a look at that?
Yeah, the way I'd like to take a look at it, if we could, is from the kinds of questions that our students have asked us in the course, and to see whether or not those questions can be answered from using this particular database.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at that.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and show up on the screen here, where we've got basically the opening screen when you get into Computer Select. And as you can see on the screen, what we've got here is a number of different alternatives. We've got the articles from computer periodicals. We've got software product specifications, hardware product specifications, computer company profiles, glossary of computer terms, and a user's guide. Jumping down to computer company profiles, one of the things that I think Deborah, when she was looking at Computing Canada, wanted to know was the name and address of Computing Canada. And I was able just to go in there and pull that information out. But one of the most powerful features, as you can probably tell, is the articles from computer periodicals. And we're going to go in and take a look at those. And as you can see, we've got 74,261 documents. And that is over a wide variety of Macintosh and DOS-based and Windows-based periodicals over the last year. So every month when you get an update, you get basically a new month of information, but it spans over the length of a whole year. Let's go in and find some information. I believe in talking on the message board, we had a question from one of the students about CD-ROM technology and how it works on a local area network. She wants to be able to put CD-ROM on her network. So let's go ahead and just type in a find. And as you can see, when I went into find, there are a number of different options here. If I want to just look at every word in every document and try and find some specific topic, I can go into Words Anywhere, which is the first option there. But I can also go by publication name, publication date, if I know the author, the article type, the topic, the company name, the product name, and whether it's a full text or just an abstract out there. But let's go ahead and just do something that we may not know exactly the publication we're looking for, or author, or date, or anything. We just want to say CD-ROM and networks. Now what it's going to do is it's going to go out there and find every article in any of the publication, any of the 74,000 publications that have to deal with that have the keywords in them, CD-ROM and networks. And it's already gone through and found all that. Now remember, it went through every document in all 74,000 documents.
Great.
And what it's done is it's found 21 documents that has that type of information in it, that has both of those keywords in it. If you look at the top menu here, it has titles, browse, find, edit, section, copy, print, utility, info, and quit. Titles basically gives us the title information, or the basic information on each one of those articles.
Okay.
So I went ahead and pressed the Enter key here, and as you can see, it's got some really good information that you may want to take a look at.
This one says what? Network access to CD-ROMs
Mm-hmm.
in client-server software for extending CD-ROM access.
Right, and there's another article down here, number 6, which says CD-ROMs and networks. Welcome to the software frontier. So in this case, you know, she's found probably 2 good articles to go in and take a look at. Now remember, when you do that kind of general search, you're not going to find, you know, a specific range of information. You may find some articles you're going to have to throw out because they're not applicable.
I understand that.
But it gives you, certainly you don't have to go through all 74,000 to find what you're looking for. But let's go ahead and look up network access to CD-ROMs. And what we're going to do here is I just press the Enter key, and it's going to go in and give me all of the information about that topic. And it, as you saw up there, before we scrolled it off the screen, it gave me the computer article, the author, the date it was published, and now it's going to give me an abstract of that information. And a lot of the articles are either abstracts or they have an abstract and a full text, which is really nice because it gives you that wide range of information out there. Now, a nice feature about here is I can go over to copy and copy this information or print it out to a printer or to a disk. So I think that's really nice information. Now let's go back for a second. We can look at, again, all 21 articles. What I've done is gone here and looked at all the different titles. But let's say I know the product I want to look at.
Okay.
I can go in and do another kind of search. And let me jump back just a second here and go over to Find again. And to help me out here, I can go in and look at the different topics or the different products that I want to take a look at. So let's say the topics here is CD-ROMs. So I can go in and just look specifically at that information, and as you can see, it brings up a menu.
Oh yeah.
Sort of like what we saw in Folio Views, where it goes in and it itemizes all the information on the topics. And we can go in here and we can say, okay, here's CD-ROM right here. It's got 867 articles on it. So I can pick that as part of my search criteria, so I can quickly narrow down exactly what I'm looking for.
Does it go out each time and find those articles as you do the search, or does it store those articles in a temporary file for you to access faster?
No, it goes out there and stores, or actually does the search each time you do it.
So the CD-ROM is pretty fast in this case in order to pull up those articles, because we're only waiting a second or two for it to go through all 640 million characters to sort this out.
Exactly, and it really depends on the speed of your CD-ROM. When I first started working with Computer Select, I had a single-speed CD-ROM.
Right.
And it took, some of the searches I did were fairly complicated, because remember what I did up here with my initial search was I said CD-ROM and networks, but sometimes I had multiple words and then some Boolean logic in there.
Right.
And sometimes it took 10, 15 minutes to go through all that search. With a double speed, that dramatically dropped, and I was able to do it in less than a minute. With the triple speeds, I can do it, you know, almost like this, which is really nice because you can quickly do a lot of searches.
Well, it's also some somewhat dependent on the speed of the computer itself, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, it is the combination of the two, but really the CD-ROM is doing a lot of the horsepower out there to go through all that information. And the faster your CD-ROM is, the faster your search is going to be. Now, it doesn't degrade any of the quality of the search having a slower CD-ROM. It just makes it easier.
It just takes more time, really, and ties up your system.
Exactly. And one of the nice things about a faster CD-ROM is you can make mistakes in how you search for information, because you're not always going to know exactly what you're looking for up front. And a lot of times I've gone in and done a search and I haven't found what I'm looking for, so I go back and do it a different way, trying to narrow down exactly. And it's a little bit of a learning curve getting used to how to do that. But you can do it any which way you want. So you can see I can go in and browse all 867 topics, or I can go in and narrow the search a little bit more.
Well, let's take a look for a second at some of those articles, okay?
Okay. Well, all I did was hit the Enter key, and now it's going to give me all the articles that pertain to CD-ROM. And you can see one of them down here is a CD-ROM survival guide of CD-ROMs and inventions, coming to a CD-ROM near you. So it gives you the whole breadth of information on CD-ROMs.
Okay, let's take another look at that.
Okay, we can go in and just press the Enter key. And here's home computer users considering the purchase of compact disk read-only memory. Drive should study their options carefully, and it goes ahead and tells you an article about that. But let's take one quick moment back a second to go into the different sections here. And I'm not going to go into these in detail. They're very similar to what we have here. It's just they provide you different types of information.
Exactly.
Software product specifications, if you want to find out what the minimum requirements are to run a piece of software. Hardware product specifications, again, the same kind of thing. Company profiles, they tell you who the president is, the phone numbers, the contact people, the address, what products they provide, etc. And a glossary of computer terms, so if you don't know what WYSIWYG means or SCSI, you can go in and look at that. And obviously the user's guide. What do you think this really means for the people out there, though?
Well, it looks to me, Barry, as if I were looking for information, that I would be able to have an entire encyclopedia at my fingertips.
Yeah. And it's not just Computer Select. There are a lot of software vendors out there providing a lot of different ways to get access to information. And certainly, like with Novell 4.0, they don't ship the disks with Novell 4.0. They ship a CD for you to install the software from a CD-ROM. And Microsoft, I think, is going to be sending out a lot of the same kind of information on CD-ROM. So there are a lot of other companies out there providing this kind of information access to people to be able to collect or interrogate information, which I think is really valuable if you're trying to find a solution to something that you're working on.
If I had to make decisions every day about various technologies and software that I wanted to use, this to me would be an ideal tool that I would want to take into consideration that I think would improve my productivity.
Well, and what's nice about it is you and I have talked a number of times about no one is an expert anymore. But with this kind of tool, you kind of get a little bit more of the perception that you're an expert, because if you don't know about a product or don't know about a technology, you can quickly go in and get information on that technology and find out if you can use it.
Exactly. Well, the other thing I guess I like about it too is this contains a glossary of computer terms. I don't know how often you've been in a situation and there's so many thousands of computer terms out there, even you and I who work in the industry all the time don't know them all.
Right.
And what a nice thing just to be able to provide to somebody who even has less experience in this, to be able to go in and look at a term at the same time that you're attempting to do a search and to find out what it is, what kind of decision you're trying to make. I really like those types of features, and as a way of really improving the productivity in my office environment. And they're the kind of things I think that we really need to take into consideration more and more as we move into this type of technology. I don't think it would ever substitute for a very, very in-depth search, one that had to have a daily information update or something like that, such as Me Data Central or Dialog.
Right.
I think in those cases, some of those databases in there are literally updated daily.
Well, yeah, and remember, this is updated monthly, so you do get some time delay there, but you don't have to read. How many magazines do you all get in your office? I know I get about between 8 and 10 in the office. You don't have to read through all those just to keep up on the information. You can just access it on an as-needed basis.
Barry, if I had to make one closing statement on this, I would have to say that this type of technology really is beginning to make sense for offices in order to provide them the kind of information that they really need to have to make better decisions for their operation.
I agree.
You know, Barry, information access is obviously going to be one of the most important determiners in improving productivity. What are two or three of the related issues that we have that would make sense for us to look at?
Well, remember, when we talk about information access, we just looked at Computer Select, which is a CD-ROM-based information access. And you also mentioned that there are a lot of other online services like Me Data Central and Dialog and many, many other ones. What you really need to look at again in your organization is how quickly you need the information, how up-to-date the information needs to be, and the cost effectiveness of that information. So I guess to sum it up is the information access issue really provides you up-to-date technology-related information. You have to look again at the cost of that access. You can spend a lot of money really quickly in online services, but if you know what you want, it may be more cost-effective to be able to use an online service than a CD-ROM-based service. So cost is certainly an issue. And distribution of that information over an organizational-wide basis is also an issue. You can put CD-ROMs now on your local area network or have them in an office for general use. So there's a large, maybe a small investment actually, for a wide distribution of that information and that access out there.
It's pretty important that you're able to have access, even on CD-ROM, to new information once a month. That's pretty important.
Well, the problem is there's just so much information out there. And getting access to all that information to answer an individual question or an individual problem, you really want to look at all the sources that you can. And this kind of technology, this information access kinds of technology, allows you to really look at the whole spectrum of opinion and information out there.
You can store a lot of information on those things too, can't you?
Well, 640 megabytes.
Yeah, million characters.
So
that's
certainly a lot and easy access, I think.
And also cost is important. If it doesn't cost that much money and you can stay on your CD-ROM until you get what you want, check every single article, that's a pretty important thing to take into consideration. You're not paying for online services.
Mm-hmm.
But as you point out, you may want to follow it up once you have really targeted on a specific area. Then you may know specifically what kind of additional information you want, and you can get at it that way.
Mm-hmm.
As we look at this whole problem, there's also something that is also important, and that is we have a lot of historical information.
Well, or a lot of information that's on paper that we want to be able to convert into an automated environment or a technology.
And it's not out there yet. It's not part of the information superhighway. It's literally physically on a piece of paper.
Right.
I think we ought to look at the whole issue of scanning and decomposition of information, images in particular, into text, because this is a way for us to access this particular information that we really need to have and can become part of our information superhighway database. So let's look at a very, very important product that can read up to 80 different foreign languages. Mm-hmm. And let's see the kinds of things that can be done with that product. And this is Recognita, which has become a very important software product. The idea of scanners being used in offices has really caught on in the last couple of years. Scanners are used for all sorts of purposes. They're used to bring in articles. They're used to copy letters that come into an organization. They're used to capture pictures that you would like to use. Barry, we are very fortunate in being able to have a software recognition package, which is, I understand, the most widely used in Europe. And that package is Recognita Plus. And the language has a number of features, and we're certainly not going to have time to go through all of them. But I thought it might be helpful if it could do just a couple of things so we can give the viewers a sense of just what's happened to scanners and just how critical they have become in terms of their capacity to really accurately decompose text in magazines and articles and things like that. We could talk about their productivity and certainly should do that, but I also want us to look at a couple examples of how it decomposes text.
Yeah, I really like the use of scanners. We have one in our office, and one of the nicest features about it is if I get something in on hard copy that I can't translate into disk media, I can go ahead and use the scanner and do that. More and more now we're getting it where people can send you a disk or send you electronically the information you need. But there's still a lot of occasions out there where you get something in hard copy like a magazine article, or you get something in a format that you can't convert, and you much rather have the hard copy and then just go ahead and scan it, and then take that scanned copy and then convert it to your popular word processing package that you're currently using.
In this day and age of the information superhighway where information comes in from all over the world, it's also nice to have a scanning package that might handle multiple languages.
Mm-hmm.
This particular package handles about 80 foreign languages. And you can have 2 or 3 different character sets, for example, on the same page and have alternate languages, and it will recognize the character set.
Well, that's pretty good. That's a lot of languages to recognize. I can barely recognize one, so which especially if I write it myself. So I think that's a critical factor when you get into a more distributed environment where you're talking across countries or certainly across different languages. But I think the key point we have to focus in on is taking hard copy information and converting it for your own use in the technology that you're using. And that, I think, is what the students need to focus in on. You're not locked out of using that text that you get in paper form anymore in your electronic word processing packages or spreadsheets or databases or whatever, because all of these packages can then take that hard copy information and allow you to be able to import it into those applications.
I'd like to see how this particular package just handles a couple different text formats.
All right, one of the things we're going to show you is 2 different kinds of formats. We're going to show you 3 columns and then a single column document. And what's really neat about this kind of software is it does handle both. And it can also handle not just portrait, but landscape style documents.
Okay.
And we haven't also touched on different size documents. You don't always get things in an 8.5 by 11. Mm-hmm. You get them in a legal size, you get them in a note card, you get them in all these other kinds of formats. So this will also be able to help you handle that.
And you really need that kind of flexibility in order to really do the job for the office.
Unless you want to retype it.
I don't want to retype it.
Then you got to get the software product that will be able to support that.
Okay.
Just as a point of reference, we have our computer here and we have a scanner. And the scanner, this is a rather old model that we have here. But the newer ones are probably, ironically, a lot smaller than this and a lot lighter. They're about maybe 1/4 the size of this and about half as tall as this, which really makes them, portable and flexible in an office environment.
They have sheet feeders too, don't they, where you can put in multiple sheets and feed them all at one time and then maybe decompose them later if you wanted to when you're not tying up the computer.
Well, the nice thing I like about this kind of environment is, especially with the scanners, you have this is the flatbed. You could also get the sheet feeder, and you can pop in 50 sheets and just let it start going, and it'll just keep going reading all those 50 sheets. And you're right, you can go off and do your word processing in your spreadsheet or your databases or go to a meeting or whatever, and then come back when it's done and it's all done for you. You don't have to sit here and deal with it sheet by sheet. The way we go ahead and do that, we just take a piece of paper, and again, this is the flatbed model.
Okay.
So let's just go ahead and just put a sheet in.
Put the image in face down.
Put it in face down.
Okay, and I see it's got marks on it that says 8.5 by 11, so you just put it where it is.
Put the different paper sizes, exactly. And then go ahead and go to the software and tell it, okay, I've got a sheet of paper in there, let's go ahead and read it. Again, with a sheet feeder, you're just going to tell it once, and then it's going to go ahead and take care of ejecting the sheets and putting the new sheet in the right place, etc.
Well, let's go ahead and read a sheet right now.
Okay.
Now, are we going to go to the 3-column article off of a magazine now?
Exactly. Okay. We're just going to pick a typical magazine article, and let's go ahead over to the screen where we're going to show This is Recognita Plus. As we look at the screen here, you'll notice that there are a lot of buttons at the top that basically tell the scanner exactly what kind of information that you put on the scanner bed. For instance, portrait or landscape, the letter or legal, whether you're going to use this as a scanner or as a fax, and some more information. But we're really going to pretend now that we basically have set it up, and it really doesn't take that much in order for you to set it up. Then we're going to go and basically pre-scan it, and what that's going to allow us to do is to be able to go in and scan the information and create it into an image file, and then at that point really the hardware piece of this is finished, and then the software piece of it takes over. So the hardware part of it really doesn't take that much time. It'll take maybe about 20 seconds in order to scan this page, and again, we said that really depends on the type of scanner that you're using.
Well, the other thing, Barry, too, is a lot of times you are going to scan more than one page in at a time.
Exactly.
And the more pages you scan in effect, the less setup time you're going to have for if you were to scan in a single page. And we have to do that. For purposes of our demo today, we are going to basically look at one page and 3 columns.
Right. Let's go ahead and take a look at that 3-column document. Here we have it right here, and as you can see that it's basically, you really can't notice it on the screen, but what we're going to do now is go to the next step, which is actually to recognize this document. And what you see here really isn't what the computer sees. The computer sees it a lot more defined than what is actually showing here. But let's go ahead and actually have it go in and read the document.
Good idea.
The next thing it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, what kind of document do I have here? Do I have a single column, multiple column, portrait, landscape? It's gotten some of that information already from your setup screen. But as you can see, what it's done here is it's now defined the order that you're going to go ahead and scan all this information.
Yeah, I see what it's done, Barry. It says that it's taken the first column, it goes all the way down to the bottom, and then there's a blue line that it automatically draws, which takes it to the top of the next column. There's another blue line. It says it goes down to the bottom of that column where there's a break, and then finally another arrow which says it's going to the 3rd column. That's pretty nice because it tells you the exact layout that you're going to have if you're trying to keep your text sequential.
Exactly, and what it will do is it'll take that 3-column text and basically convert it into a single column. So you have to make sure that you're reading your columns in the right order for it to be able to go in there and recognize, or you're going to come up with some confusing text at the end of all this.
And it does have the feature in here, Barry, that if you wanted to change that sequence, you could do it manually.
Exactly, but we're not going to do that because it did correctly surmise how we wanted to do this.
Exactly.
So now it's figured out the order that it wants to scan it. Let's go ahead and actually have it recognize all of this, and it's going to go through, and you'll notice the blue space being taken up there. It's going through and actually reading all of the information, and the next thing you're going to see is some yellow taking over that area, which is basically then going to be able to go in and recognize all that information.
I see.
Now here what it's done is it's come up with a little bit of a glitch here. It said I don't really recognize what that is.
It's found a spurious character. It could be just even as small as a piece of print of ink or something like that.
For instance, yes, exactly. Let's go back to the full screen so that we can see what exactly it is doing. As you can see, what it's doing here is it's thrown up on the left-hand part of the screen the character that it couldn't find, and it's giving you some suggestions, which I really like, and I think that's a fine suggestion. And then it didn't recognize that second quote, so it's going to give me another suggestion. And then it's going to keep going through until it finds something it doesn't understand. And what it didn't understand was all those dots down the side.
So let's just, there's an item there that says drop garbage. Just go ahead and click that because that will just ignore it.
And it's going to keep going through, recognizing until it gets to the end of that document. Okay, here is another character it didn't recognize, and that is an S, and it did suggest an S.
What I like, you notice, Barry, that what it did is there were some pretty bad characters up here, and yet it didn't stop with those characters. The word is revision, and it was able to actually read right through that. That's a pretty good package to do that.
Exactly. Here's one that it suggested the wrong
thing, right?
Wrong letter, so I know that that's an F. I'm going to go ahead and type in an F and have it correct it.
Barry, one of the characteristics of this software is it has a learn characteristic. So if you're going to get a lot of those Fs, or then you can put it in learn category, and it would be able to just handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And as you can see, you can dynamically go in here and make it recognize or correct anything that it can't recognize.
Right.
And we had a pretty good hit rate there.
I think so. Now this is and this is in ASCII now, isn't it?
Yes, it is now in ASCII. Let's go ahead and take a look at the statistics that we have for this document. And we're going to go up to recognize and then down to statistics.
Okay.
Okay.
That's really interesting. It took 25.7 seconds to scan it.
Right.
It took 1.2 seconds to decompose it, and 12.6 seconds to recognize it,
Mm-hmm.
with an overall recognition speed of 4,080 words per minute. I guess that's not too bad. That's about, if the pages were full, it would be 2 or maybe even 3 pages a minute, depending on how many characters.
Exactly. And we had a pretty full document there. So
Well, even at that, Barry, the reading speed was about 1,300 characters, 1,300 words a minute, excuse me.
right.
Now, what I like about it, it said that it recognized 4,023 characters. It recognized 857 words. And in this particular case, the accuracy was 100%.
Right. And we cheated a little bit because we kind of helped it when it didn't recognize.
Yeah, there were
something.
a couple characters in there that we worked through. But you know, Barry, if we'd had like a long document,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw, for example, that the F was not the kind of character that
That it would recognize.
recognized, and we put it in the learn mode, it would learn that, and as it went through the rest of the document, it would not. It would basically correct that particular
Yeah.
word.
What I found in documents is the unrecognition or the characters that it doesn't recognize are pretty consistent, and if you can tell the software, hey, this is really an S or a T or an I, then it will go through and not make that same mistake over and over and over again. Another thing that I like is you can turn this feature off if you've got 50 or 100 pages.
Right.
You know, just go ahead and
scan it
the
all in
documents,
first.
Scan it all in, and then you can go back and correct it later because, you know, one of the nice features about the sheet feeder is you don't have to attend it.
Well, you can also upload all of this into whatever your word processor is. So if you want to do something with it or edit it or make comments, for example, on it, you certainly can do that as well.
Exactly. And so what we're going to do right now, real quickly, we're not going to go ahead and save this document, but let's go ahead and just do a real easy document, which is basically a one-column aerial or courier type of document, and those are probably the easiest to do.
In this particular case, this is Arial, okay, 12 pitch, and we did this on purpose because it is a different type font.
Right.
While Recognator will recognize many different fonts, we just thought we'd pick a different one to see what kind of recognition response we would get and the degree of accuracy in the recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, rather than explain it again, Barry, can you just go ahead and go through the process and see what's going to happen now if you set this up?
Well, ironically, guess what? It's not that different. You're going to go through and you're going to see that it scanned your document okay. Then it's going to go ahead and read it just like it did before, where it goes ahead and defines the order that it's going to go ahead and look at all of the different paragraphs or columns.
And it does it sequentially, so you can see exactly how it's going to handle the words.
And if you had any problems, you could zoom in on the area on the right-hand side of the screen right there to go in and figure out if it was exactly the right order, because I realize it is a little bit small, but you can go in and zoom in on it. And then it just goes ahead and recognizes it. Again, this isn't rocket science. The first half of it is the horsepower that the scanner provides, and then the software takes over with more of the sophisticated recognition software part of it. Now one part I want to point out here is when we go ahead and create this document, we can go in and save it as any kind of file format that this scanner software allows. And if we look over in the output format, which is right down here on the right-hand lower side of the page, you'll notice that I can do it in General Word Processor, AMI Pro, DisplayWrite, Navy Diff, you know, all different kinds of formats. So Lotus WordPerfect,
yeah.
Word, etc., which is a really nice feature because then you can just bring it directly into your word processing software or any kind of software that you want.
And I see there's also an image file you can bring in if you just want to
For pictures
for pictures and things like that.
Sure.
Barry, I think that this is the kind of thing that an office really needs to consider very seriously. The software doesn't cost that much. If you have a scanner in your office, and particularly as we talked about in multiple languages or different fonts, and you want to download it to your word processor, whatever it happens to be, this is the kind of thing you should take into consideration. I also like the idea of being able to load in 50 pages and not worry about it, and then later on come back, let it do its decomposition at leisure or whatever it is, and then if you want to do the analysis or you want to make the correction, you can do that.
Exactly. One other thing I like is, as you can see here, we don't have the most sophisticated scanner in the world, but we have a fairly sophisticated software product to compensate for that. So you don't really need a state-of-the-art, super speed, Fujitsu type of scanner or Hewlett-Packard or whatever. If you have something that you're currently using, if you buy some good software to be able to use with it, I think that it'll really go a long way to.
Well, I think that's really what this is about, isn't it? Improving productivity, and this is certainly one way and one tool that's really important for everyone to consider. If they're trying to take articles and information and pictures and to use them as part of what they do.
And using the current technology that they may have in their office today. Scanning technology is really something that's deceptively easy. Whenever I want to bring someone into my office and really impress them, I show them the scanning technology, because even though it looks very complicated, it really is a very smooth technology that allows you to do a lot of different things. It allows you to take the paper documents that you may get from old word processing systems or incompatible microcomputer systems and be able to convert them from paper into a microcomputer environment that you're able to use. It also allows you to take historical information that you may have done manually and convert it into information that you can use in a technology environment. And also, it allows you to have distributed access for that information in the office. You can take something that one person has done and then make it available in electronic form for many, many different people. So I think scanning is here to stay. I think it is really a valuable technology that people are going to be able to utilize a lot more in the future than they ever have been able to do.
Well, it certainly makes sense in terms of being able to access historical documents that they're on paper. Nobody can type anymore that fast, and not with that degree of accuracy either.
Yeah, and one thing I like is when someone can't find the file, or can't find the document, or it came from another office or another agency. You can always just shoot it through the scanner, and with that sheet feeder, it really is easy. You just turn the software on
go away
and do it.
Well, I guess, Barry, once you get all this information in, historically and otherwise, and you begin to want to distribute it internally as well as to have access from external information as well, and organize it all in a good way, you need a good package that will let you do all this organization. And one of the packages that we really need to look at is Lotus Notes, in which it has the capability of allowing us to control and organize all of the information, both in the office and other information coming in from the outside, such as through a information service. So let's look at it. Corporations and organizations are constantly looking for ways to better improve their communication, not only internally, but to the outside world. Today we have with us Len Smith, who's from Eon Corporation. Eon Corporation is going to be a very important corporation, not in the foreseeable future, because it really deals with the whole issue of interactive TV. And Len, why don't you talk a little bit about what the company does and the productivity tool that you're bringing with us with you today.
Okay. Well, Reynolds, first I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to join you and your students today. Eon is building an interactive highway, but it's much different from the digital superhighway that we typically hear about in mass media publications today. What Eon is doing is building a wireless path into and out of the consumer's home so that we can move information that we need in order to make television an interactive medium. That will allow us to sell to consumers a little device that goes on top of the TV set, And using that set-top box, the consumer will be able to interact with news polls or commercials or play along with game shows, interact with sporting events, maybe even control what statistics are shown during a play-by-play on a football game. And as Eon has been working on building this interactive television network now for almost 7 years. But one of the things that's interesting about working at Eon is that our business is influenced by a very wide range of other industries. We have to keep track of what's happening in the computing business, as well as the publishing business, as well as all fields of marketing. And as we started to sign up what we call service providers, those are people who are going to put content into the interactive TV world, we found that it was very important for us to understand a lot about the context of our potential partner's business. Mm-hmm. And so we set out to find tools to help us do that, and we settled on the one that I'm here to talk about today, which is a product called Lotus Notes.
Okay. Why don't you show us how Lotus Notes has been able to really address those issues?
Well, I'll be glad to. For example, one of the things that's different in my life than a couple of years ago is I, like many people in business, read the Wall Street Journal every day. Mm-hmm. But I no longer get a paper subscription. I now get it delivered to me electronically online. And so by clicking on this little symbol for the Wall Street Journal here in my Notes desktop, I can open up today's copy of the Wall Street Journal and see the stories that are important to me. Now, part of the value of having this information delivered electronically is that I get only those stories that are important to me. I don't have to read about earnings in the grain business, which doesn't have anything to do with my life. So what I look at are the front pages of each of the 3 sections of the journal, as well as selected stories about companies and industries that are important to me.
Yeah, it just takes a couple.
So you see here the date for the date that we're taping this, and the headlines only for the stories on page 1. Now today is actually the last day before the Oscars, which are tonight, mm-hmm. And so here's a story about Hollywood. And if I just simply select that one story, I get an image of the Wall Street Journal logotype, the headline, and the actual text of the story.
And the interesting part about this particular story is that for other companies, it really wouldn't be that important.
That's right.
But for you,
that's right.
It's the essence of your work.
Because one of the very important applications that we're working on is to make the Oscars themselves interactive so that you'll be able to vote for your favorite movies from the home. Now, it'll probably be a while before the Academy chooses to use our voting rather than their own.
Of course.
But at least we'll be able to put the results of our viewers from their homes in real time, right as the broadcast actually happens.
Yeah, I see it says, before Hollywood honors its best, film's worst gets the raspberry.
Well, there you go. That's just one of the ways that we make press about Hollywood.
Right.
But what's important about this, as you said, is not only that this is an important story in our business at Eon, but also that I can easily share that story with anybody else in the company, people who may otherwise perhaps miss it.
Okay.
And by simply pulling down the mail menu here, I can then forward this story to anybody at Eon, in fact, anybody to whom I have an electronic mail address, whether they work at Eon or perhaps are connected over the internet.
Good idea. So I see it says to CC. What's BCC mean?
BCC is if I want to send a copy to somebody without the other recipients knowing that addressee was included in the transmission list.
Okay.
I personally think it's sort of a bad practice. Rather than send this story to anybody, I just wanted to make sure that people knew that we could do that. If we just back out of the journal and the journal headlines, by the way, I should point out that we keep the last 100 days worth of the journal online right on our local area network. And that means that if all of a sudden on some day I find out I now need to know about a particular company or a subject that's been covered in the journal in roughly the last 4.5 months, but that I had not been reading those stories, right. I can get to them very easily. I simply switch to an alternate view that shows me, this is the view by date that we've been looking at. I can look at it by company, industry, market sector, news subject, or government category. But Notes does more than just bring me the journal, which again is still, this is a fairly one-way thing. We've made it kind of two-way by allowing me to forward individual stories, and we do a great deal of that in our work at Eon, sharing information with lots of people around the company. But I can also use a tool called Hoover, which comes from a company called Sandpoint, for a product that they call business topic research. And what Business Topic Research, or BTR for short, does is allows me to go out and survey literally dozens of different online services for information about a particular topic that I need information about. But what's different about BTR is that it's packaged so that an end user can compose a search right from his or her desktop. There's no need for a corporate librarian or some information technology specialist. Rather, I can simply say, I want to go to the Compose menu here, pull down the request for a new search, and then send that off. Hoover then manages all the communication to the different databases, finds the subjects, finds the stories that are on the subjects that are of interest to me, and brings them back, depositing them in my Notes desktop. Here you see the Hoover request form, and so I can specify information that lets me control, for example, if I only want to look at general business press or if I only want to look at particular trade publications. And then I can enter individual values about what kind of information I want to search for. So if I wanted to get all the stories that appeared in the weekend's general business press about the Oscars, for example, that would be a kind of request. We typically use this, and the way it makes us more productive, again, is when we're about to begin a dialogue with a brand new company that we've never talked to before. We want to learn about their company history. We have a special tool we call Company Profiles, again from Sandpoint and Hoover, that goes out and gets quarterly filings or annual report data as well as recent news stories. And so our account teams can be much more focused and productive and better informed when they sit down to meet with a potential business partner.
Can you do a search on this, a short search?
Well, let's back out one level here and see what searches we've got that
Okay.
are already stored in line. Now this is again the view by author, so these are searches that I have run. Let's switch instead to responses by search name, which categorizes them based on the title that one of my colleagues had given to the story when it was actually run. So here's information about Bell Atlantic, who, as you probably know since you live in this area, is also active in the
Very.
emerging interactive television field. Here's a story about a set of stories about what CBS has been doing in the interactive field. Let me show you some examples that are perhaps a little simpler and may relate more directly just to what happens at Eon. One of the things that's tricky about Eon, as I said, you have to know a lot about a lot of different businesses. That makes it hard for us to find people who have even things like a simple vocabulary in the TV business, high-tech fields, and marketing fields. So we put together a technical glossary that allows somebody who may not know what the NREN is about to simply enter NREN and get a definition right out of their Notes desktop, so that the people who do know what these complicated technical subjects are about can easily share this information with their colleagues. And most importantly, by sharing it one time through Notes, they're able to make it available for all future uses with no incremental human work. And so that makes people much more productive when they try and share this information. People at Eon still certainly do go to the water cooler and ask each other questions. We don't all just sit at the screens and do that. But it's a way that we can share information very quickly. Another example is the last time I went, not the last time, but a previous time I went to hire a new employee in our growing business. I ran an ad in the Washington Post, the local hiring practice for professionals, and was literally swamped in resumes and couldn't even read them all. Then I had a problem that because I wasn't getting back to people fast enough, they started calling me, and I was spending time trying to find their resume and answer them on the phone instead of actually simply be able to get back to them. So what happened was that my administrative assistant on her own took it on herself to put together a Notes database which she would use to enter all of the key information, not the whole text of the resume, although Lotus now has a product called Notes Imaging that allows you to literally scan the entire resume in. But she just put the summary information in, and then as I read a resume, I'd write very quickly, you know, schedule an interview, no thanks, or whatever my reaction to the candidate was. She then entered that data for me, and literally in one day we had broken the back of this avalanche of phone calls and paper that we were drowning in. And all of a sudden, I was in control of my job. She was much better able to answer the phone because she wasn't getting as many calls. And the candidates were able to know much more quickly where they stood, very easily. We're trying to get reconnected here. I'm not sure what we're doing.
Does your corporation continue to see this as a key product in how you manage the internal communication and
Yeah,
how you're going to access?
Absolutely. One of the things that I'd like to show you is in fact, as we begin now, finally after 7 years, approaching the day when our network goes live and operational, we're started to develop, as many companies have, an operational handbook. What are our standard procedures? How do we handle equipment failures? What do we do if some key person is not in to do their job for a day? And we're developing that procedures manual entirely within Lotus Notes, not from an original paper copy. So
Interesting.
new policies and procedures are being developed by the individual members of the team, put into Notes where they are shared and reviewed across the company, and where they are finally approved and signed off without any paper ever being generated.
I think the key is that everybody that is involved in your whole corporation, this is sort of a composite
Right.
development of policies.
Absolutely, and again, it's all done without paper, which makes us much more productive and allows us to get a better end product very quickly.
Sounds like a good idea. What are some of the other long-term uses you see for Lotus Notes in your corporation?
Well, we're working now on building a system for what we call trouble tickets. Although we'd like to think that our network will be perfect and will never disappoint anyone, the reality is that any complex system does fail occasionally. And when a customer calls to report trouble, that usually results either in a quick resolution, or if we can't solve the problem immediately, we open what's called a trouble ticket. Those trouble tickets will be entered into Notes and will be available to anybody in the technical development organization, to the product managers, to the sales teams, or to the customer service folks to share information about how we get that problem resolved and get that customer back into the world of interactive television.
It sounds like you are planning to use this productivity tool for a long period of time.
Absolutely. In fact, Notes would be the first product I'd put on the desktop of any new PC.
I wonder how many users it can handle at any one time. Do you know?
Well, the new agreement that Lotus just announced with AT&T contemplates that there will be tens of thousands of those users by the end of 1995.
And all at one time, perhaps?
Yes, connected to the single AT&T network.
That's rather impressive.
Well, we'll see whether they can pull it off, but I'm hopeful that they can.
Well, I would imagine that if it's been able to serve you effectively, it certainly should be able to serve a large corporate structure effectively.
And it is today serving those companies very well.
Well, thank you so much, Len. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this very important productivity product. I think it's going to make a difference.
Reynolds, thank you very much. I enjoyed it.
ED230, Managing Computer Applications, Tape 2 of 2, GW Television.
Charles Ramsberg, the Senior Account Executive from Resimex Corporation, is here with us today. Resimex Corporation is dedicated to improving the selection and hiring of candidates for positions in all fields of endeavor, in higher education, business and industry, government, and in the private sector as well. Chuck, you've been at this for a while, and I understand that you've put together a product that will really help us to make a difference in how this field will have to be faced in the future. What has happened over the last few years, from what we understand, is that there are more and more candidates than ever before who apply for positions. This has to do with the whole changing dynamics of our access to information. I remember at one point in time when you could go into a job and you might only be facing 20 other candidates. Today, when you send out a quest or information or a query for a certain type of position, you could get 1,000 candidates. And of those 1,000 candidates, you might even have 10 or 20, all of whom are highly qualified to fill the position that you indicate you want to fill. That makes it pretty difficult. In fact, it makes it almost dysfunctional. But I understand that your corporation has really begun to look at this whole process and has developed a very important product which will allow all of the organizations that are out there to really make a difference in how they get exactly the right person. Is that true?
That's quite correct. In fact, what you have is a situation that's good news and bad news. And the
Okay.
good news is that you have a much larger pool of people to select from. The bad news is that the pool is so large, you have to apply technology or have some way other than manual processes that were common in the employment process to be able to select, retrieve, and evaluate those resumes. It's really gotten to the point where you're looking at a very changing employment base. You know, before you looked at external applicants. Now with downsizing, you have the issues of redeploying internal people as well as external people, bringing them into the organization. And because of that, I think you've come up with a whole new issue and a whole new problem to deal with, and the best way to deal with that is with technology.
Can you show us exactly how you've addressed this technology to solve the problems?
Sure, be happy to. I have here on a PowerPoint slide basically a theme that Resimex focuses on, and that is human skills management. You're looking at the most critical asset in any corporate environment, and that is the human, that asset who provides the resource to get the job done. Again, that asset may vary from an external candidate, a part-time employee, an internal employee full-time, it may be a contractor, but you're dealing with a human skills issue and large volumes of human skills issues to deal with. If you look at traditional human resource problems within the HR environment, you're looking at the issues of cost per hire, the cost of getting the right person on board, the time that it takes to fill job openings, and sometimes the position of filling those job openings is much more beneficial to the corporation if you can fill them quickly and make that person productive right away. You also have the problem of just overwhelming paper files. As you mentioned earlier, there was a time when you would apply or have a position in the classified ads, you may get 50 resumes back on that position.
Right.
It's not uncommon in today's marketplace to see 100, 200, 500, 1,000 resumes that will come in response to those ads. We have organizations today that are clients that are processing 6,000 or 7,000 resumes a week. So it's an overwhelming paper file problem and an overwhelming paper file from a redistribution problem. Those resumes coming in and then redistributing that paper to the hiring managers within the organization. A follow-on problem is now that you're dealing with high volumes of personnel transactions in an organization and applicant transactions is the issue of law, EEO reporting, affirmative action, tracking data that must be maintained on higher volumes of applicants. You're also looking at an issue of corporate image from the standpoint of when you had 20 resumes that came in against an application, you could send a response letter, it wasn't onerous, or you could call the people and say thank you for your resume and show that personal attention to those applicants. But when it's 1,000 or 1,500 every time you place a request for a position opening, it's a massive effort to be able to be responsive and personalize the contact from the corporate world back to the applicant who's applying for the position. And you also have the associated cost with maintaining control of these increased volumes, with massive areas of storage required to store paper volumes. Organizations that may have 100 or 200,000 resumes that they've accumulated over the course of a year, year and a half, that must be maintained accessible within the organization. If you look at the traditional recruiting process, you're looking at a process that was paper intensive. The paper came in, someone had to spend the time to read that resume, make a determination as to whether or not it was had the skills or encompassed the skills they're looking for. Following that, someone would typically data enter information into a system, so it had to be keyed into a system. You had to manually file the paperwork after it came in, and then when you were trying to do a match, you had to manually retrieve that data and then refile it again. So you had a substantial amount of time that was dedicated to the filing and refiling of that paper, which was very non-productive. You also had the issue of the review and match time. How much time does it take to find that exact position when your global database of candidates is 10,000 or 20,000 or 50,000
Right.
as opposed to a few hundred or a few thousand. So that, in a traditional role, would take from days, weeks, months to be able to match those positions. So we want to set a mindset here. What we're really talking about is re-engineering this process, taking a different look at the process as far as what we're trying to accomplish. I like to use a quote by Dr. Michael Hammer, who wrote a book called Re-engineering a Corporation. And he defines re-engineering as a fundamental rethinking and radical redesign of the business process. We're stepping back from the process and saying, here's how it was done traditionally. How can we best accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, which is the filling of positions within the organization and managing the filling of those positions accurately with the right candidates. What Resimex did is stand back and look at the process and say, some of the process that needs to be accomplished in finding the right candidates can be managed and controlled by technology. So we started with imaging, where you actually scan the resumes into a database with an optical scanner. Or you can fax them in. One of our clients, which is Motorola, has all their resumes faxed directly into a database, so there's no paper on the receiving end of the transaction. We then apply artificial intelligence so that we can go into that document that's been scanned in, always keeping the image, but then using artificial intelligence basically to index back to the original copy of that document. And artificial intelligence, and we'll talk about in a little more detail about some of the extraction, but we're looking at the extraction of name and address information, telephone number data, educational background, work history, all the pertinent skills associated with that person's background, and then applying expert systems to evaluate that data that's been extracted and making a determination about where that person's skill sets allow them to be employed within the organization.
Is there a minimum and maximum number for the process?
Basically, what we've done is, in building the expert system, have taken the knowledge of literally thousands of recruiting experts over a number of years, over the past 6 years, and trying to apply what they consider from an expert position, what qualifies a person to be a software engineer. You know, what kind of educational background,
Right.
what kind of skill sets. So it's a percentage hit. It's part of a patented process that we've developed, but it's basically a percentage hit that tries to make a general decision on what that person is qualified to do based upon a select number of hits in different areas.
So you have a description of, let's say, if it's an engineer, it might also be a specialist. And in some certain field, specialist and engineer might mean the same thing, so there'd be an equivalency.
That's exactly right. And
Okay.
even more specific in that we're looking for very specific engineers or molecular biologist or aerospace engineer, and basically, again, evaluating the profile of that person that's been extracted with artificial intelligence. We've distributed the capability with the system to the desktop using a graphical user interface and client-server
Right.
architecture. So what that allows us to do is to utilize the equipment that most organizations already have in place, PCs, Macintoshes, or other types of workstations that may exist in their environments.
So they don't have to upgrade their networks in order to
No.
use this?
Typically, no. Excuse me. Typically, they don't have to upgrade their networks. We basically provide a server that manages the data out on that network. And what that allows us to do, again, is to, through compression, save a lot of data space, has no impact on their existing server environment, and the existing users on the network can become users on the software.
Well, that's pretty good in a sense, because one of the big problems that corporations have when they move into a new product line is they're always concerned about having to put brand new equipment on or specialized equipment in order to solve a problem.
Exactly. You know, re-engineering doesn't have to be expensive if you can take advantage of your existing technology. And we really expanded that technology. If you look at a flow of the way the system works within Resimex, you know, you start with paper, which is a resume or an application. Again, with the options on this diagram, you can see that You can scan in that document. You can fax it in. You can also email documents into the system. Many employers, for their internal employees, will have them fill out a skills sheet or a skills-based resume and email that directly into the system so they can keep track of the internal skills. The AI engine then captures that data automatically, saves the image. We also, for external candidates, automatically generate acknowledgement letters and sign them for you. So you immediately relieve the process of taking care of keeping the corporate image about being very responsive to the public, providing that response letter, and signing it. And then everything is online, basically, with the original image, so you've gotten rid of your paper, and everything is maintained electronically. One of the keys to the system, and we talked a little bit about this from the standpoint of evaluating a person, what their skill sets qualify them to do. One of the core parts of the system is what's called a knowledge base. And the knowledge base is a series of rules. And at the present time, we have approximately 100,000 rules associated with the employment function and skills information on candidates. This is a dynamically growing database. Artificial intelligence lends itself to growing more intelligence if you have a dynamic style to your database.
And this does?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we have a group of linguistics experts, actually PhDs from Stanford, who continually update the knowledge acquisition process, continually updating the expert systems, and re-releasing that knowledge base periodically to our existing customer base. Customers also have the option of updating their own customer base, their own menus, their own skill sets, etc., that they may utilize locally within their organization.
So it learns?
It learns, absolutely. It learns through an interactive process from the customer standpoint and from the customer through Resimex's knowledge engineers. It continues to learn on an ongoing basis. It might help to explain what artificial intelligence is in the context of the Resimex system. And I'd like to use a couple of examples. I'll use the example of looking for someone with a BS degree from Harvard.
Okay.
A typical search engine will allow you to search for specific words or terms outside of their context. So if I searched in a search engine for the word Harvard, I'm looking at a search that would be bring back somebody with a Harvard graphics background or lives on Harvard Lane or whose name is Harvard. What artificial intelligence allows us to do is to say, I'm looking for a BS from Harvard, and it's extracted intelligently in that process. So in addition to that, you take terms like the word Ada, where someone may live in Ada, Oklahoma. They may have Ada, the computer language, as a background. They may have the American Dental Association as their background on their resume. The system extracts information in context to make it context sensitive so that when you search and retrieve that data, it makes sense against the profile that you're searching against. An extension of that is the job categorization, which we talked about. Again, if you don't have a context-sensitive extraction, you can't make an evaluation of somebody's background and see what they're qualified to do. We also do a process called automatic extraction, automatic matching to open requisitions. And what that allows us to do is to build a job opening on the system and have the system automatically capture that information on an ongoing basis. And that is a very valuable feature for people letting the requisition work for you instead of having you work for the requisition. Right. A couple of other key points that we should note is, number one, the system identifies the best candidates when you do a search. It also prioritizes that candidate list in the order of best first. So we have a situation where we get the best candidates, and we also prioritize those candidates in that search process. From a scalability standpoint, the system is architected so that you can expand it from a few users to multiple users throughout the architecture of the environment. And we have clients with 1 or 2 users on the system accessing the software, accessing the database, to a company like IBM that may have 200 users on the system. We talked about the architecture being open, which allows you to use PCs, use the existing network, or use Macintoshes in your network environment. We also have a variety of things that are being added onto the system from the standpoint of alternative inputs. Everything from handwritten applications being able to add it onto the system. You have voice response where people can nominate themselves for positions using a touch-tone phone and update the information and give Resimex the names of the people that have nominated themselves, and also it will rank those people that have nominated themselves and give that list to the hiring manager. The biggest question we always get is, does the system work? And the best way to point to that is to look at the customer base, the people that are noted for their quality of organization. And basically who use the system on an ongoing basis.
Well, it seems to me that you've thought this thing through pretty carefully, and I think it probably is going to make an enormous difference in the changing culture of hiring in this entire field. And Resimex certainly deserves credit for moving into this endeavor.
Well, clearly we are the basis of strategic positioning and strategic re-engineering of the human resource environment.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to start with an overall presentation of what Resimex looks like on the screen. And that presentation is a graphical presentation, a graphical user interface. So if I want to look at something on the screen, you can see on the upper left-hand side, I'm going to point to Resume, and I get pull-down menus that make it very easy to use. It's very non-keyboard intensive. What we in fact have on the screen, if you look at the left-hand side of the screen, we have a copy of a resume. And this is an exact image of a resume that was either scanned into the system via an optical scanner or faxed in via electronic fax. This is an exact image which allows you to get rid of the paper and maintain the electronic copy on the system. This copy can be enlarged to have a better look at the system simply by clicking on the enlargement function. I can also print or fax this resume off the system at any point in time by simply clicking on print and printing the data out and selecting my printer. I can also fax the information out simply by clicking on fax and faxing it directly to someone's desktop. And I can select the fax number I want to send it to, click that fax number, put a header on the information that I'm faxing so the person knows exactly what we're sending them before they receive it. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see the information that's been extracted via artificial intelligence and expert systems. If you look at the top part of the screen, you'll see the personal ID information. You'll see that, number one, we've date stamped when the resume was scanned into the system, and this is done automatically. We've also tracked where the resume came from a sourcing standpoint. The purpose of this is to keep track of the most effective sources for obtaining resumes into the system. The next thing that we extract automatically with artificial intelligence by reading the image is the name and address information, as we see. And the system will extract up to 2 addresses. It will label those addresses accordingly if they are permanent address, school, office, whatever the address might be. It will automatically label those by reading the resume. After the name and address are extracted, the system automatically generates an acknowledgement letter and signs it for you since you scan your signature into the system. The next extraction is the telephone numbers, and it will extract automatically from any free-form resume up to 3 phone numbers. It will also label those numbers as to homework, pager, fax, whatever that number might be. The next extraction as we move down the screen is educational information. It will find within the resume the educational data associated with this applicant. It will extract the year of graduation, the degree, the major, the school graduated from, and the GPA if it's present. Following the educational extraction of data, the artificial intelligence will then automatically extract the work experience, start and end dates, month and year if they're present. It will also extract job titles and the company that employed this individual. Now in the first case, the first job experience, we see there is no job title. If you find out the job title via interview or telephone conversation, you can simply right-click and pop up a library of job titles that are associated with the system. For instance, I could add information titles. I could make this person a maintenance programmer, and it automatically puts the information into the title information. The system automatically calculates the years of experience by looking at the initial date of employment, taking into account any break of greater than 2 years. After the information is extracted regarding work experience, as we go to the bottom of the screen, you see the skills, keywords, concepts that are extracted from this person's resume. And again, a context-sensitive extraction in that it's looking at the words in context from the paragraph that they're being withdrawn from. The context sensitivity is important because the next step that we do is take the skills information that's been extracted along with the educational data and the work experience and automatically job code or categorize this resume. And part of the expert system process will analyze this information and then prioritize the categorization based upon the experience, education, and skill sets included. In this particular case, this person was triple categorized as first and foremost a software engineer, secondarily information systems, and thirdly hardware engineer. In essence, what we've accomplished with this screen is we've gotten rid of the paper by keeping the original image of the resume. We've also done all the data extraction automatically, which eliminates data entry and indexes the information back to the original copy of the resume simply by scanning it into the system. Now, once we have the information in the system, it's very easy to then extract that data and find the information that we're looking for and find a candidate that may fit a position that we have. To do that, I'm going to go to the upper left-hand side of the screen, and I'm going to click on Resume, and I'm going to click on Search. And what the search screen brings up is the availability of information that I want to retrieve about a particular candidate. Let's say, for the sake of the demonstration, I'm going to look for a software engineer. So I go down to the middle of the screen under Criteria, and I click on Category. What comes on the screen are a number of different categories that are included on the system from an expert system standpoint that are created via the expert system. I'm looking for a software engineer. So I click on Software Engineer, and I'm telling the system I want a candidate who has been qualified by the expert system as a software engineer. Now I'm looking for specific skill sets associated with this software engineer, so I'm going to click to the little box to the left of Software Engineer, and it brings up a series of skill categories that would be associated with a software engineer. I'm looking for specific computer languages. So I click on Languages, and I find a list of languages that may be appropriate for my search. For this particular search, I'm looking for somebody with C background. So I click twice on C, I click once on Lisp and once on Prolog. The difference between clicking twice and once is that the C language is a required skill. So that skill is required. I will not consider the candidate without having C. Secondly, I click on Lisp and Prolog only once. That means it's a desired skill. It would make the candidate a better candidate, but is not required to be considered for the position. Now let's look at some other things that we may want to search on. Let's say, for the sake of the search, we also want specific operating systems. In this case, I'm going to say I want Unix, make that a required skill. VMS would be a good skill to have, nice to have. Macintosh Toolbox. Let's grab Sun OS. Let's grab MS-DOS. All of these, by the way, are customers that use the system as well. Apple Computer is a customer using the system. Microsoft uses Resimex for recruiting. Sun OS, Sun uses the system, as well as DEC. Now, an important thing to recognize when we do our selection of criteria to search on is that when I click on any of these items, the system automatically expands that search to include any synonym or concept that mean exactly the same thing. So when I clicked on Unix and said I'd like to have somebody with Unix background, the system automatically says, all right, in addition to Unix, there are at least 15 other items that mean the same thing as Unix. So the user does not have to understand or know all the different ways that you can recognize Unix. It automatically expands to that capability. The significance of that is that it rapidly and dramatically expands your search. As an example, if you take to find a BS degree off of a resume, there are literally 2 pages of ways you can recognize a BS degree. But from a user standpoint, they simply click on bachelor's degree. To recognize and find UCLA, University UCLA, there are literally 473 different ways to find UCLA out of the database. The user does not have to be concerned about that. The user simply clicks on the specific term they're looking for, and the software automatically expands to a concept-based search. Now let's select several items more, and then we'll do our search. Let's say that we're looking for some information as well on artificial intelligence. So we'll grab AI as a term, maybe knowledge engineering, maybe expert systems. I can also go across categories. Now I'm looking for a software engineer, but maybe I want a software engineer. I'm going to go to the left here into human resources and say I want a software engineer who's done some work in developing systems in the recruiting environment. So I'm going to grab a software engineer who has some background in staffing, possibly technical recruiting, maybe as a generalist or federal guidelines. So I've selected a number of other items from a different category that would enhance the value of this particular applicant. What I've begun to do, if you look in the middle of the screen on the left, is create the beginnings of a profile for the candidate that I'm looking for. Now it's important to recognize that everything I'm searching on was automatically extracted from the resume. It required no data entry. I've selected a software engineer that must have C and Unix and a number of other items that are desirable to have for this candidate, and the system has automatically expanded that search to all concepts that mean the same thing. Now, I could also search on job titles as they were automatically extracted and select a specific job title that I might want to search on, maybe information titles, and pick a title that might be pertinent to this search. I could search on companies. Maybe I'd like to recruit somebody from the semiconductor industry who's got background with semiconductors. I could go in and I could click once and say I'd like for them to have worked for Intel. If you go towards the middle of the screen, you'll see the company name of Intel. I can click twice and say they have to have worked at Intel for me to consider them. I can click 3 times and say I don't want them if they worked at Intel. So I can exclude as well as include skills in the search process. I can also search based on degree, and I could pick a very specific bachelor's degree. If we look on the left-hand side of the screen, I could pick a very specific bachelor's degree, or I could simply say I just want a bachelor's degree. Master's would be a desirable but not required skill. Doctorate is overqualified, so don't bring me any candidates that have a PhD. Again, all this information was automatically and intelligently extracted. I could select based on specific majors. In this particular case, I'm going to request a CS and EE background. I could actually select based on schools. Again, it was automatically extracted, and I could select a candidate based on the school they attended. The years of experience was automatically calculated, so I could select based on years of experience. I want someone with at least 9 years of experience. I could select based on GPA. I could also select based on date received. Do I want to just look at current resumes that have come into the system? Do I want to look at resumes that came in within the past 60 days? What's my range? I could select based on source. Maybe I want to look at internal candidates versus external candidates. I could select by geography. So maybe I want to see candidates that are in a specific area or arena so that I can recruit to that area as opposed to looking at candidates nationwide. To do my search, I simply go to the top of the screen and I click on the magnifying glass. And what the magnifying glass does is brings me in the bottom left hand of the screen the list of candidates that have been selected. It shows me the candidates. The little number to the left of the candidate is the number of desired skills. So they're in ranked order. The first candidate has all the required skills plus 6 of the desired skills. The next group of candidates have all the required skills plus 5 of the desired skills. So in essence, what I have is a list of candidates out of my database, which could be 10,000 or 50,000, with a search and response time of less than 5 seconds to evaluate against a complex set of criteria to find exactly what's in my database. I could take this group at this point, I could print them, I could mail them, email, or I could fax them directly to whomever is interested in the candidates. Additionally, I could look at the image of each one of these resumes individually, and if I click on image and you pan back on the screen, you can see on the left-hand side then is the resume, on the right-hand side is the summary data, and I can review and make my decision as to whether or not I want to fax, email, or print these out individually. If I click on the N, I can see the next candidate as well. So the power of the system is the ability to be able to evaluate a large volume of candidates for any position that you're considering, to do that without having to incorporate data entry as part of the process, and to be able to distribute these resumes very rapidly and very easily directly to the hiring manager that may be interested in those resumes. And these could be internal or external resumes, and that you're managing the overall human skills management for your organization. The search can be memorialized by turning it into a requisition, in which case you can kick off what's called an automatic rec matching process, which will automatically then search all resumes as they're scanned into the system and tag them to that job opening, so that you have a memorialization or a record of all new resumes as they come in, allowing someone to log onto the system and only look at those resumes that have matched since the last time that they checked. The requisition process also allows you to build requisitions that will search and track against the database to keep track of your tracking information, so that if I wanted to look at requisitions that I'm responsible for in a system, I could say, let me see those requisitions. It will bring the requisitions up on the screen. And if you look on the left-hand side, you can see the requisitions that I have on the system that keep track of all the data that I'm associated with and searching for against those particular job positions. This information will keep track of all matches that have been made. It will also automatically update the tracking information in the system. If I click on matches, and there are matches associated with it, or if I click on tracking, it will show me the tracked data. The important part of the requisition applicant system is that they're totally linked, and this is a totally integrated system, again, to manage the human resources as they flow into your organization, be it internal or external in the process.
For large organizations, this software seems to be one that would really help them to solve their hiring practices. What's your sense of it?
Oh, absolutely. A lot of organizations, educational and non-educational, are still doing the applicant process with a 3 or 4 part application where they have to data enter all that information into a micro or a mainframe application, and then they still have to go through the whole search process to try and find the right applicants. And it's not just this type of application that the students need to be looking for. Resimex, a great product for the applicant process, but there are a lot of other applications out there for other kinds of activities, and if Resimex can do this for the application process, just think of what other companies are doing out there for other kinds of activities in an organization.
As we have more and more applicants and we require more and more specific skills, Resimex is certainly a product that will really let us identify the kind of people that we want to hire.
Oh, absolutely. The name of the game here is finding the right applicant quickly and getting that person in for an interview.
And with all the correct skills and competencies needed to really do the job.
Yeah, and if you can do that, you've got a good chance of getting that employee. If you don't, you're going to lose them to somebody else.
I guess that's the other part of it. When you're looking for someone, you want to get them in right away.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of having 1,000 applicants and being able to pick the correct 10 applicants or 20 applicants, and out of those to get to 2 or 3 that you really want to interview and do that quickly and efficiently is something that I've never heard could be done before, and certainly not through automation technology.
Well, it may take us, how long would it take you to go through 1,000 applications manually versus using a tool like Resimex?
I wouldn't even want to think about it.
No, I wouldn't either.
Of course, the other issue is how do we train people within operations in order to make it work, and I guess that's what we really need to look at now.
Yeah, one of the hardest parts is once you've got the employees, then how do you keep them up to speed?
Okay. Increasingly, corporations and organizations are concerned with the entire training process that needs to go on to bring their employees up to a point where they can use the new technology. One of the areas of training that's become very important in these organizations and agencies is training for improving quality. We have a way of talking about it. We call it total quality management. We're very fortunate today to have with us Mike Dulworth. Mike is the president of Insync Corporation, and they're one of the leading corporations in the United States in the development of multimedia training software. In this particular case, we're going to ask Mike to talk about what they have done in their research and development to improve total quality management through the use of computer application technology. Mike, why don't you tell us a little bit about the kinds of work that your corporation has done, and why don't you run us through some of the software that you developed that you feel will contribute significantly to improving productivity in the organization and agency workforce.
Okay. Well, as you know, Reynolds, interactive multimedia software can significantly increase the retention rates of the students who are using it, and is also a very, very flexible resource. It can be used by an instructor within a classroom. You can project it up on a wall, or it can be used as a one-on-one training tool with a student, or it can be used with a group of students gathered around a PC. And what we find is that it increases retention rate among these students by about 30% because it's multi-sensory in the sense that the training is delivered by sound, it's delivered by reading and text, it's delivered by you interacting with the software, and so you have these multiple sensory inputs to your understanding of the information, which is better than just sitting in a classroom and hearing someone talk at you and explain something, and you kind of drone on and you kind of fall asleep. So we find that this can be a very exciting tool. We can also find that it is very much a just-in-time tool where you can take the training when you need to apply it within your workplace, as opposed to some training typically where you take a training class at a period of time, but you then go and apply it maybe 3 months later, and by the time you apply it, you've actually forgotten it. And the only thing you have to go back to is some kind of a reference book, which sits on a desk sort of, or a shelf collecting dust, wherein you can go back to the multimedia and immediately get back up to speed on what you need to know. So we think it's a very exciting technology, one which today is really a possibility because of the advent of 46 computers and the processing speed of these kind of computers with video and audio cards that exist now. You can incorporate text, audio, graphics, video, and animation all within one software program and build very exciting and very engaging programs.
It's very interesting that you decided to use TQM, or Total Quality Management, as one of your first major ventures. As we mentioned a couple minutes ago, this has become more and more important in all areas of education as well as business and industry. What made your corporation move into this area as one of its initial areas for providing training?
Well, as you know, the advent of TQM started 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
15 years ago in some of the earlier companies that adopted these principles. And what we found over the years is that these corporations and organizations as a whole have spent an inordinate amount of money training their people on TQM concepts, principles, tools, those types of things. But the actual application of those principles and tools and processes back in their work site has lagged behind the training. So what we tried to do, or what we talked to a number of companies about, is to more closely match the training to the application. And since they had spent all of this money on TQM training, seminar-based type training, and really had come to the conclusion that they'd wasted a lot of money, they saw the use of multimedia as a way to get their people up to speed in a very short period of time, in a very cost-effective time, and in a way that they could then apply that back at their work site in a just-in-time manner.
Why don't you show us a part of what you developed here, and
Sure.
let's see how it works for your company and how it works for the organizations that you work with.
Sure. What we tried to do is develop a multi-module approach to the training. So it would segment the training in a way that was most sort of usable to the person taking the training. The first module that we have here is called TQM Fundamentals, or Awareness. What is TQM? Who are the gurus? What's the continuous improvement process? What are the tools? That kind of thing. Then, of course, part of this interactive training is to test your knowledge that you've gained through the training. Mm-hmm. And that's what this awareness module here. We call it the Basic Tools Challenge, but it's a game based on Jeopardy where you play this game and you test your knowledge of TQM.
Interesting.
The next module is a Baldrige assessment module. What that is it's an assessment of an organization against the Malcolm Baldrige Award National Quality Criteria. So there's things like leadership, strategic quality planning are part of that criteria. And you go into this company and you interview their CEO and you talk to their customers and you look at their quality data and then you assess them against the Baldrige criteria, and then you compare that to the actual Baldrige examiner score that organization received. So it's a way of sort of thinking through how do you apply this criteria and these measures within your own organization. And then the last module here is called TQM Skills. And what that is are there various tools that exist. We've identified at least 28 of them, which you can use as part of the total quality management process, things like Pareto charting and scatter diagrams and histograms, that type of thing. Well, this module is a very in-depth tutorial to teach you how to develop a Pareto chart or how to use a scatter diagram and that kind of thing. So again, it's this multi-module approach that you can go in and learn about the various aspects of TQM that you specifically need to know about.
Mm-hmm. Well, can you take us into one tool area for just a couple of minutes?
Sure. Let's go into the first, the more generic TQM fundamentals. This will take just a second to load up.
Welcome to Micromentor's TQM Fundamentals, a program designed to introduce you to the key concepts, tools, and practices of total quality management. To begin, click on the Start button.
One of the things about this software is, since people don't have very good keyboard skills, or most people don't have them,
I am
we
absolutely
want to
convinced
just have
that a
it
focus on
mostly be
quality
a
is what
point and a
enables
click
Xerox to
type
survive the
interaction
decade
with the
of the 80s.
software.
In this program, you'll learn about the fundamentals of total quality management. The first section answers the question, what is TQM? You'll also find answers to the questions, what is the value of TQM? Who invented TQM? What is the language of TQM? How do I get started? What are the tools for practicing TQM? What is the Baldrige Award for quality? And do I know the basics?
Okay, so
Select
the
the
idea
question by
here
clicking on it,
is that you
or
can
use
migrate
the
around the
introduction.
program
Pull down
using your
menu at the
mouse
top of your
and
screen.
click on one of these major categories. Or, like a lot of software, you can go up and pull down menus from the top of the screen and migrate through the program this way.
Okay.
So this is one of the ways you interact with the software. The other way might be that the software asks you to do things and will not go on until you
interact
answer the
with-
questions or fill in a blank or that kind of a thing.
And again, all this is supported by sound,
Yes.
and it's interactive, right?
Yes. Yes. So I'll just go, well, I'll go on one of the more interesting ones. How do I get started with TQM?
How do you get
Discusses
started
the
with
continuous
TQM?
improvement process.
Although each company has its own unique aspects of implementation, total quality management always involves a continuous process improvement cycle. You will be involved in this cycle, probably as part of a team. With each process improvement, you'll move through a series of stages. Here we use 4 stages.
I'll skip
each
around a
broken down
little
into
bit
several
just
steps.
so we don't spend too much time in one area. Another sort of principle of multimedia development is the information is multiple level. In the sense it starts off with the information in a very general sense, and then you move down a couple layers in terms of the depth of the information. So like this provides the continuous improvement process at a sort of basic level.
Right.
But then if we click on number 1 here,
first
then it goes
stage
down
of the
another
TQM
level.
process improvement
Okay, a little
cycle,
bit more
you'll begin
detailed
by getting
information.
organized as a team. Then your team will identify your customers and meet with them to determine how well your outputs, the products and services you provide your customers, are meeting their needs.
Okay, then again, there's another level. So again, you can click on one of these and it'll
This
go
step
down
involves
another
first
level in
identifying
terms of the
your
depth
customers.
of the information.
Depending upon your
So
team's
it does,
job
typically you
responsibilities,
don't
your
go
customers
much
may be
below
internal
3
to your
levels
company.
of that depth, because then it gets to be too much information. And then it gets more difficult to migrate back around the program. But the idea here is that you have those multiple levels. You can go and interact with the software and move around it, pause, replay, stop, that kind of thing. And then you can jump around it by going up to the main menu any way you want. So you could go up to topics and pull up, let's say, what are the tools for practicing TQM,
What
and
are
then
the
it would take
tools
you
for
to that part
practicing
of the
TQM?
software.
Oh, that's
so
fine,
you
yeah.
control your interaction with the software, and you control what information you see.
I see now, there's a whole series of icons, 12 icons. And each of these icons, for example, this one over here says Tools for Gathering Information and Identifying Problems. The second group is Tools for Measuring, Displaying, and Analyzing Information. And the third is Tools for Planning and Making Decisions. And okay, and they're all, I can see they're all related and all outlined. What would be a good one to show, like a histogram?
Sure.
Because a lot of people, I think, are aware of that as
You
one of
just
the
click
tools.
on that.
The
And it
histogram
will
is
bring
used
up
to
the
picture
basic
the shape of a
information.
data distribution to help
Okay.
determine whether a process is in control.
So you have
It is
the
a bar
audio,
graph of
you're
the data
listening to
that
it,
shows
you
the
can read the
comparative
text
frequency of the
also,
measurements.
and then you can click on the actual schematic here and it'll give you an example of
The
how you
workers
use
at
a
a plastic
histogram.
tubing factory
Great,
were attempting
okay.
to determine if the process that determined the actual diameter of their 12-inch tubing was in control. They decided to construct a histogram in order to see the frequency distribution of the tube diameters. First, data was collected from samples of tubing produced during
That's
the first
interesting
run of
how
each
they,
day for a month.
how they do that.
Next, a
And
frequency chart was constructed
it also
using
lets
the
you
data
have
ranges
track of
seen
exactly
here.
where you are within the
Frequency
total
chart
package,
was
doesn't
then
it?
plotted
So
on
if
a
you have to
histogram.
return to that
Since the
that
distribution
item,
is bell-shaped
you could
or
do so,
normal,
and this could
the
be
process
used
of
for
version
either a
control.
whole group of people at
However,
one
for
time,
analysis,
or it could, for someone who perhaps has had a little problem in understanding, that person could actually go back and go through the entire module and section until they got it correct. Is that
That's right.
okay?
That's right.
So it really
And the other
saves
thing
it.
about multimedia is that it has the ability to be totally customized. So as you saw the tubing manufacturing example, we could pull that example out and put a hospital service sector example back in, and without disrupting the program at all. So it is sort of like a microchip that you pull in and put back, because this is all digital information.
What's the most important thing in this whole training
Choose a tool by
idea
clicking on it.
that you
Once you've
consider
selected a tool,
that
read through the
the
information
audience and our students would really need to understand? What do they need to understand about why this is such an important tool in increasing productivity compared, for example, to just something that would be interactive, as an application package would be, where you interact with it? I like what I hear because I can listen, I can see, I can interact, and I know there are parts of it, but you must have had a lot of logic that you applied to this when you put it together. What was that logic?
Well, I think there's a couple of different things. I think the first thing is that it's supposed to be fun and engaging, and this software, we hope, is designed to be fun and engaging, because
Okay.
typically training is, everyone thinks it's a little bit of drudgery, and this makes it fun.
Okay.
The second thing I think that's very important is that it's just in time. So when you need to apply it, you learn it. So there's no gap between when you learn it and when you need to apply it. The third thing is that it saves money. I mean, it's cost effective. So any manager who's looking for a way to train their people in a cost-effective manner, this is a viable alternative. What we talk about is that this software replaces the presentation part of seminar-based training. It doesn't necessarily replace the group interaction part of training, which of course is important, but a lot of times, 50% of a class is spent just sort of getting information out there, and this type of software can do it in a much quicker, much more effective way. And the retention rates, as I mentioned before,
It's
can be up to 30% higher.
That's interesting, and that's based on just a one pass-through. If you consider the fact that if they want to repeat it, they can repeat it, then your
Sure.
retention rate could even be higher, couldn't it?
Sure, yeah, very, very true.
I also like the idea in this of being able to put in specific examples according to the organization or a university.
Right.
So you could actually take a university's problems, for example, and you could then develop multimedia images and examples that would specifically fit the needs and problems of say, the university or the organization.
Yeah.
And that's really what this is about, isn't it?
Right, right. What's going to happen is, currently multimedia development costs about $1,000 per finished minute, which is very expensive for most organizations. But as we've developed these modules, in a sense, they can become templates where the basic, let's say 80% of the information can be the same, whether or not you're IBM or GW University, but you can take specific examples, 20% of that program, make those modifications and deliver that product to the user for much, much less money than creating it from scratch.
Also, the idea, as I began to see this, is that you can have a moving image, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to show a process from start to finish, then you could actually build that into that particular module.
Right, right.
And and then people can see every single step that's involved in that.
That's right. That's right. And if they, for example, there was one piece of that process that they wanted to more detailed information, they just click on that and it would expand into a whole bunch more information, on that specific area that they're interested in.
And then they could also print it out beside if they wanted to print it out.
Sure.
Well, and is this simply for one computer right now, or is the thought that it could be used in a network environment?
Yeah, there is. I mean, that's the goal, I think. I mean, as more organizations get that kind of capability, this type of of software can be delivered. The issue, there are some technical issues in terms of the data transfer rate of networks. And these are very, very big programs. They're graphic, so they take a lot of information to show these types of images. And so we have to be concerned about that and work that into any implementation.
I think one of the most important things that I saw today here is that this is the beginning of the kind of training that can be geared very specifically toward an organization's individual needs. And it does so using as many of our sensors as we have within the organization, that we can apply to this type of learning. I think it's really important, and we thank you very much for talking about what your research and development in this process.
Well, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You know, Barry, more and more, training through automation seems like a very desirable way to cut costs and to be more efficient about how we train people to really do the jobs that they need to do. And with all the technology that's out there, training has become more and more a critical thing in order to move organizations along and to increase productivity. What are some of the thoughts that you thought about as you went through the total quality management piece?
One thing I thought was most important, and I'm just kind of, as I was looking at that, I was kind of remembering the training classes that I've been through, where you have someone standing up in front of the class talking at you, and you have your little notepad and you're writing down notes, or you come away with a little notebook. And I really like the approach where it's an interactive approach. The point he made is well taken. You're listening, you're seeing, you're doing things on the keyboard, you're using your mind to make decisions, and that's really the best way people learn, is to be able to use as many of their senses as possible to be able to go in and absorb the information. And that's really what the multimedia environment is all about, is being able to get all the information together and put it in a way that you can absorb it as much as possible.
You know, the whole issue of quality management has become more and more important as we move into this whole area of intense technology. And I think they're attacking the right issue at the right point in time. And the way they're doing it through the use of multimedia, which can also be customized to a given type of application.
No, I like that, 80% standard and then the 20% customized, so that you can have it target specifically the concepts and ideas and focus in on the concepts and ideas that your company needs to address.
Well, that's really the key here. The key is not to have something that's so locked up,
or so generic,
or so generic that you say it works for everybody because it doesn't. So it's really a good approach, and it's an approach that business and industry as well as education needs to consider. But Barry, we've looked at a number of very important packages today, innovative and creative research and development initiatives that are going to make a difference. What kinds of impact will these packages have on what's going on in the office environment and organizations?
I think probably the most important goal of a lot of these applications is to allow you to make better decisions. And in that, there are a number of different ways that you can make better decisions. One is to provide a broader scope of information and being able to access that information a lot more quickly and a lot more reliably.
Such in the case of Resimex Corporation, where you could have 1,000 people and you could extract very specific skills and competencies that would let you pick the correct person to fill a slot. That's what you're talking about.
That's one part of it.
Okay.
Computer select. Being able to go out and ask a specific question about the technology that's available today, and then being able to extract certain industry articles about that kind of technology.
And in the case of Lotus Notes with Len Smith from Eon Corporation, he was able to take all of the information that they needed and to be able to organize it in such a way so that they could send it to people within the company. They could get it, they could get the information from outside or send information outside if they wanted to.
Yeah, I thought the Len did an excellent job in that. He was able to apply that Lotus Notes technology in a number of different ways, which is really very nice in a software application. You can apply it to meet different needs in your organization, which I thought will really help an organization, one, make better decisions, two, react faster in the industry, three, to improve the quality of what they provide, and four, to increase the productivity.
And of course, you can't do any of this unless the information's available to you. And while we have a tremendous amount of information in our superhighway which is ready to be accessed, the products like Recognita, which lets you scan information that's still on paper, and to be able to put that into your database and to make it part of the information source that you need to improve your decisions was certainly another important factor that we have to consider in any type of environment that we have.
Well, the key here is information on demand.
Okay.
You have to be able to get to the information you need in order to make an appropriate decision, whether it's applicant information, whether it's reports that come from incompatible software, whether it's training needs. You have to be able to get the information you need in order to react and act in a flexible and responsive manner. And I think that this type of software, now one thing I want to emphasize here, we're not recommending these specific products in every situation. You have to go out and look at your organizational needs, and there may be some very good products out there that meet other needs. But what I think we're trying to get the students to do here is to, hey, there is some technology out there that's doing some really neat and innovative things and may really impact your organization in a positive manner, and you really need to look at that kind of technology.
Well, Barry, let's again review the factors that we think are really important and will make an impact. You talked about improving quality, correct? You talked about increasing productivity, that is, being able to do more with less resources and better than ever before. You've talked about doing it in a way that made sense for the organization.
And also reacting faster.
Being able to really do the job in a very quick and efficient way.
Exactly.
Well, these factors are really the one that you have to take into consideration. Barry, thank you very much for this assessment. I think it's important, and I hope that our viewing audience will really take very carefully into consideration the kinds of products that they saw today and the kind of thinking that was involved that will definitely increase productivity. I think the other last one.